So as you would have seen in the video just above, the ABC did engage in a rather ambitious project called 7 Days Later, and they successfully pulled it off, which was fantastic. I guess we need to start off by trying to establish the concept of the ABC as a cultural infrastructure. So since early days 1930s, when the 1932, when the ABC first emerged, it has this role of facilitating cultural activity within the Australian region. This has been there's various examples of this through ever since 1930 odd. However, in 1983, when the ABC Act emerges, then it becomes part of their remit. So they're legislated to become a cultural infrastructure for Australia. And they do that in a variety of ways that you've seen through things like their innovation department, various websites that they do around, events and particular things. Certain types of programming for certain audience members, all sorts of things. They do a lot of cultural infrastructure work within the Australian scene. That's not really what we're here to talk about. This is more about the ABC as a cultural institution engaging in social media to work with users around cultural production. And 7 Days Later is a perfect example of that, where there's a group of individuals, the producers, who have a concept or an idea, who then open that up for audience participation. And the way that they did it was through a Google Hangout, engaging users to come in and throw around ideas or whatever. They then took that to Triple J, engaged that group of users to develop those ideas. They were then using all sorts of social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, Google Plus, whatever, to share their production, so what was actually happening on set, and keep including ideas coming through that way. So what did happen was a television episode was produced each week with, I guess, a starting idea from a central group of producers that was then, in the first instance, or in the early stages, I guess, polished or enhanced by users. But then you started to see that production model shift dramatically from it being an in-house ABC with a little bit of user-generated content to more, once the model had been sort of established a little bit more, to a model which included more and more input from the audience. User-created content, or perhaps user-generated content is a better way of talking about it in this context. So what we're seeing is a classic example of a media organisation, otherwise known as a cultural institution, the ABC, specific type of cultural institution, who is not only producing content but to a specific remit, but now they're engaging social media tools to bring in the audience and to produce content alongside them. And the ABC have done this in a few other spaces and areas before, and continue to do it now as well. Probably one of the better organisations at doing this. But interesting to think about this through the lens of what Hinton and Horth start to hit upon, in that the curatorial role is starting to switch from the producer to the consumer. So it's not entirely there, and it's not entirely there. It's neither producer or consumer. It's this lovely combination of the two. So what that does, this is where it leads my thinking, is to try and understand what's happening in that dynamic in the middle, where producers and consumers are intersecting with each other, and there's a great conversation happening in that space. And so that's where I think this role of the cultural intermediary starts to emerge as something which is specifically important in this space. And this person, let's talk about it as in terms of a human actor in this instance. This person sits in the middle and understands what each group, what the norms are, what their approach, what their perspective, what they're trying to achieve by engaging in this cultural production activity. They understand both of those groups and can translate between the two. And so that's where you see someone like Daley Pearson, who, in the instance of 7 Days Later, becomes that cultural intermediary in that he understands the regulatory frameworks and of the ABC. He understands the needs and desires of the users. He's also a taste agent, so he knows what sort of content will appeal to a broader audience. So he's engaging these specific skill sets to produce content. And I think this is something that the Hinton and Horth book alludes to, but it comes a little bit short in that they highlight the broader context, but I think we can narrow it down and start to think about this role of the cultural intermediary. So as you're producing your social media campaigns, this is important to think about because you become that cultural intermediary. You understand the needs of the brand, entity, person, group, organisation, whoever it is that you're building a campaign for. You also understand the audience that you're trying to talk to. So you're that conduit between the two stakeholder groups. Now this is really significant because this is the person who can then communicate effectively to both of those groups. It's an area which is emerging. I'm dramatically or increasingly interested in this space, and I think we need to do a little bit more work in this space also. I'll leave it there, and we can take questions arising from this concept of cultural intermediaries into the tutorials or into our intensive days, and we'll talk more about it then.